Hey, welcome to 9394, a music podcast with Travis Roy. I had the opportunity to sit down with my friend Adam Thomas, who has returned after talking about REM last time. This time he came to talk about the 1993 album August and Everything After from The Counting Crows. On the previous episode with Adam, I mentioned that I was a big REM fan, but I really wasn't that familiar with the album Monster. It was among the albums that I kind of skipped in their discography. And every now and then on the show, I'll do albums that I'm pretty unfamiliar with just because I recognize their importance and want to talk to the person who wants to talk about that album. But this album, man, I mean, this is why I started the show. This is one of those albums that when I thought, okay, 93, 94, some of the best albums to ever come out came out in that time period. Some of my favorite albums of all time, such as this one. It's up there. Top 5, probably. I mean, it's just, I love it. So here is me and Adam gushing about it. What can we say? Okay, yeah, here we go. Yeah, okay.
When I think of heaven, deliver me in a black winged bird. I think of flying down in your sea of pins and feathers and all other instruments of faith and sex and God in the belly of a black winged bird.
Hey! Oh, how you doing, buddy?
How are you doing?
Good. Come on, dog.
All right. Yes, guys.
Anywhere but in between, she's been crying. I've been thinking, and I am the rain. Well, I said, Mama, 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 why am I so alone? Well, I can't
All right.
go
Adam,
outside.
hey, welcome back.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Good to be back.
How you doing with my dog crawling all over you and trying to lick your incisors? There he is. That's
Yep,
Scruffy.
there he is.
Yep, he's like, oh, you're talking about me.
He wants the attention.
He
doing good.
He needs a lot of attention. You wouldn't think listening to my podcast that I have 2 dogs because the other one's just always chill. But all right, and it looks like he's already like gonna be a problem. All right.
Oh, he'll be all right, I think.
All right. So you drove up and you listened to The Counting Crows, August and Everything After on the way up here plenty. I listened to it plenty this morning. You and I have both grown up listening to this album. It sounds like it's a pretty big album in your life.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Me too. This is one of my all-time favorite albums. In fact, like, I've done some of my favorite albums on this show already, like Dinosaur Jr.'s Where You've Been, but this might be my favorite album that I've done on the show so far. Like, I put this on the last couple weeks, and I'm just, like, in my car, like, yelling. I know every word, you know what I mean? I know every word. I'm, like, feeling it. It's, like, a super emotional album. It's one of those. Gets under your skin.
It really is. Yeah, I started listening to it, and with the last time I came for Monster, I got to the point where I'm like, I need to listen to something else. Mm-hmm. And this, it had just been on repeat for the last, 3 days.
Oh, yeah.
So, we're outside working, I got the headphones in, and it just starts all over again.
When I think of heaven, deliver me in a black winged bird. I think of dying, lay me down in a field of flame and heather, render up my body into the burning heart of God in the belly of a black winged bird.
When did you get into it? How did you get into it?
I got into it, first of all, with the Mr. Jones single.
Of course. I
That
think
one-
we all did.
Yeah, that was the first single off the album, so I got into it from there, but I didn't get into the rest of the album until I got into college a couple years later.
Oh, okay.
So I listened to it, I liked it, and then Long December came out on their next album in '96, and I'm like, okay, I really like these guys.
Yeah.
And then by that point, I'm really getting into more music and listening and going deeper and actually buying albums and listening to the whole album. So probably 98, 99,
Okay.
freshman year of college, I picked up the whole album and had it ever since.
Gotcha. For me, this is yet another classic Columbia House pull. In '94, I would have gotten it. Yeah, I would have heard Mr. Jones, and that was a good single. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll try that album out. And that was the only song I'd heard at that point. And I've never, ever stopped listening to it. I have so many great memories of it. Like, I remember that summer being in Canada on this houseboat all by myself where the rest of the family was off doing other stuff. And just like being on the lake in the water in a foreign land as a 14-year-old, you know, like an hour away from where I actually live.
Land of Canada.
Right. But just like, I don't know, it's just laying there like on a dock and like listening to it on my Walkman and like looking at the stars and just, it's always kind of giving me that relaxing feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, most of the time in college when I listened to it, it would be when I was walking to from class or walking at night, just relaxing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't music you listen to when you're doing something. It's more when you're trying to relax or take the edge off from the day.
You would think, but I cleaned my house to it this morning.
Okay, well, that proves me wrong then.
Here's a question. Can you pick a best song on this album?
I have my favorites.
I mean, I have my favorites too. How many tracks are on this album?
11.
Yeah, I have 11 favorites.
Yeah. I was trying to rank them. Like, I listened to it in its entirety when I started the drive up here, and I'm like, okay, because I was having a hard time placing them. Like, what's number one? What's number two?
Yeah.
And I started going through it, and I'm like, all right, I'll listen to each song, and I'll write it down, and then I'll decide, one at a time.
While you were driving, you were writing things down?
Well, no, I had written it down, and I'm like, okay, just look over and put a check mark next to it. If I think of yes or no.
Gotcha.
And I kept writing it, and it's just, some of the placements were hard.
Yeah.
I ranked them 1 through 11, but, I mean, sometimes they can be interchangeable. I think it's going to be dependent on the mood you're in and what you're thinking or what you're going through at that time. It's going to change the position of them.
Yeah. What did you decide today, at least, is your number one?
Number one is actually Murder of One. I think that's my favorite one on it.
Blue morning, wrapped in strands of fist and bone. Curiosity, kid, doesn't have to mean you're on your own. You can look outside your window. He doesn't have to know. We can talk a while, baby. We can take it nice and slow. All your life is such shame.
Talk to me about it.
It's really interesting because you have this progression going through the entire album, starting off with around here and then working its way through, and you kind of have this progression, but then 9 and 10 before you get to Murder of One are kind of slowing it down, and this is more of a pickup. But the message is just completely opposite, as happy as it seems. So Dirts wrote it thinking back on his life when he was little and not having any problems, and his life is full of infinite possibilities, he said.
Yeah.
But then it's less like that when we grow up because we have to deal with relationships that are empty, stupid, and brutal, is how he described it. So, yeah. And then he said, if you can't break the chain, you end up a Murder of One for sorrow. Which, Murder of One is a nursery rhyme from back in the day.
A Murder of Crows.
Yeah. But I actually did research on this because I was reading it and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back in time and figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
So, Murder of One is a nursery rhyme first written down in 1780.
Up a hillside in the snow, casting shadows on the winter sky as you stood there counting crows. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for crows and 4 for boys, 5 for silver, 6 for gold, 7 for a secret never to be told.
It was first referenced in a book by Samuel Johnson and George Stevens, which was plays of William Shakespeare.
Okay.
And the way they quoted it was 1 for sorrow, 2 for mirth, 3 for a wedding, and 4 for death. And it was just those 4, that's all it was. But in the song, if you listen to it, he actually lists 7 of them.
Yeah.
And there's actually 13 in most modern as they count them.
I've never heard this before. I've been aware since I was a kid that it was referencing some sort of nursery rhyme, but I don't know which kids where are singing this nursery rhyme because I've never heard it.
I haven't either. And then it's from the 16th century.
Yeah.
So, and like nobody's really said it since.
Well, but like, Pocket Full of Posies and all that kind of shit
Yeah.
is still around. Ashes to Ashes.
But I guess this is more probably, if we were European, we might have heard it.
Yeah, I think
because,
that might be it.
the murder of one is listed for magpies, which we don't have a lot of magpies here.
Mm-hmm.
So when they brought it to the U.S., it was murder of crows or murder of jackdaws.
Jackdaws.
Yeah.
Don't hear that bird very often.
No. They changed it for the U.S.
Okay.
because we didn't have those birds here.
Right,
But
makes
then it
sense.
just kind of lost its meaning and nobody's really used it.
Gotcha.
But I found the 13 of them are kind of interesting. It's almost like the 12 Days of Christmas. This is like 13
Crows that
crows.
you count?
Yeah. So it's interesting to go back and look at it.
That's fun. I like the message of that song, at least as far as I can infer from it. It's not subtle. He's chanting the word change over and over at the end, like you got to do that. You've got to do that. You must do that. And one of the main themes, I think if there is a main theme in this album, it's mental health issues.
Yes.
Which makes sense for Adam Duritz, right? Someone who's always been very upfront and open about his struggles with those issues. Lyrically and in interviews and everything, Yeah, it is maybe not the most happy song, but I get joy out of it at the same time, out of its message.
Yeah, because I think the only constant in life is change.
Right.
So, and he's putting that front and center, going, you have to change.
End and center, really, because it's the last song.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I had a hard time picking my favorite on this album and picking the weakest. I thought about doing the same thing you did, like ranking them all, but I was like, well, no, because then I'll actually come up with one that I think is the weakest. And this is the first episode where I just couldn't do that. I couldn't come up with the weakest song. But I could come up with a favorite song, and that is Anna Begins.
A friend assures me it's all or nothing. I am not worried. I am not overly concerned. My friend implores me for one time only. Make an exception. I am not worried. Wrap her up in a package of lies. Send her off to a coconut island. I am not worried.
I love Anna Begins so much. They're a pretty conventional band in a lot of ways. Kind of traditional in their approach to songwriting, but not Anna Begins. Anna Begins it takes you down these weird paths musically, and then as far as the content of the song, it hits me harder now as a 43-year-old man than it did, 30 years ago. But it's always been my favorite on the album, I think. I certainly can relate to the idea of being like, well, I've been burned by love. I'm not even going to try anymore. And then having someone kind of like wear you down, then you find like, okay, I'll open the door. I will love again.
Yeah.
And then she disappears and you're like, oh, well, I'm not ready for that. I wasn't ready for that. Oh, fuck.
Yeah, here we are again. Shouldn't have done that.
You try to tell yourself the things you try to tell yourself to make yourself forget. To make yourself forget. I am not worried if it's love, she said. Then you're gonna have to think about the consequences. But she can't stop shaking, and I can't stop touching her. And this time, when kindness falls like rain, it washes her away. And Anna begins to change her mind.
But it's all framed so beautifully that, again, it almost sounds hopeful. It almost sounds like a true love song. But you listen to it a little more deeply, and it's like, oh, this is really sad.
Yeah. I like that one. That one is a kind of more of a special one. My mom's name is Anna.
Oh, okay.
So it just kind of, I gravitated towards that one.
Yeah, I
a little
understand.
bit. So
That makes sense.
About it anymore. I'm not gonna bend, and I'm not gonna break. I'm not gonna worry about it anymore. No. It seems like I should say, as long as this is love, but it's not all that easy.
I actually have a connection with my mom in this album too, because there was 4 singles from this album, right? It was Mr. Jones, Round Here, Rain King, and Murder of One.
Right.
But on a local radio station around here called The River, that's defunct now, that was like adult contemporary that I didn't really listen to, but my mom did back in the day. They played Sullivan Street like it was a single all the time.
Really?
And she loved Sullivan Street. My mom just like loved this song. So like, there's not a lot of bands growing up that I was really into, let alone that I was obsessed with, that she actually dug. And so I was kind of, I've got like a weird kind of mom connection with this album too, which is cool.
Way home leads back to Sullivan Street. Across the water, home through the town. Past the shadows, fall down wherever we pretty soon now won't come around.
Were you able to come up with an underrated song for this album?
Underrated, Perfect Blue Buildings.
Okay.
I really like that one.
It's gorgeous.
And it just, I don't know why. It sounds like it could have been a single for him, but I don't know why they didn't do that. Really like it.
I stayed home with my disease. Ain't this position familiar, darling? Well, all monkeys do what they see. Help me stay awake, I'm falling.
Honestly, I think literally every song on this album could have been a single.
Yeah.
I mean, like, literally. But you're right. That one almost seems like it was in my memory, but no, it's just beloved. And again, oof, sad. I mean, that's maybe the saddest song on the album. It's up there. But it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not one people talk about as much.
So help me stay awake, I'm falling. Asleep in perfect blue buildings beside the green apple sea. Wanna give me a little oblivion, baby, and try to keep myself away from me.
I didn't go with that one. I thought about it. I ended up going for my underrated song. I went with Omaha.
I love that one too.
Yeah, right. We love them all.
Yeah.
Omaha is just such a again, like, it seems like it should have been a single. It's so catchy, but it's sandwiched right in between the opener, Round Here, a single, and Mr. Jones, which is the song of the band, whether they like it or not. And I never hear people talk about it, but it's one that when it comes on, I'm ready to, in my mind, it's like Beyonce came on, or like, I don't know, H2O, or something that's completely, like, that gets people riled up in a way that Counting Crows doesn't usually get people riled up.
Somewhere in middle America, get right to the heart of matters. It's the heart that matters more. Think you better turn your ticket in. Get your money back at the door.
No, I get that. That's a great song though.
Yeah.
I was listening to that up here. There's a couple lines that I don't know if he meant, but it sounded like he was talking about religion a couple times.
Yeah, the whole walking on water thing.
Yeah, would you drop a line my way? So it's like he's drowning and he's looking up and Jesus is walking on water above him, not helping him.
And that also gets to another thing about him. So vocally, for me, he's always been, because I used to sing in a band, and he's probably the person I most consciously emulated and tried to sound like in almost every band I was in. But lyrically, I never really thought about it until taking notes and thinking about it deeply the last few weeks getting ready for our episode. I'm like, man, what the fuck is he talking about half the time? I always feel like I know exactly what he's talking about, I'm like intuiting it or like assigning my own whatever to it. But in a lot of ways, this shit is really cryptic. And there's a lot of like lyrics in Omaha in particular that I'm like, whoa, I can almost get what you're talking about. But I guess it's partly the appeal, right? Like if it's cryptic poetry, then we can all assign whatever we want to it.
Yeah, we do our own interpretation of it.
Yeah.
Took the cannonball down to the ocean, across the desert from the sea to shining sea. I rode a ladder that climbed across the nation, 50 million feet of earth between the buried and me. How do you?
So I already said that I wasn't able to come up with a weakest song. Growing up, I always thought that the weakest song on the album was Ghost Train, but now I do not feel that way at all. I just absolutely love Ghost Train. It stands out as being so different from the rest of the album, you know, in terms of feel. So I'm going to say that that's my not weakest song. Were you able to pick one? Did you slot one to number 11?
I did, time and time again.
I considered that one. I did consider that.
That and Ghost Train were the two I was thinking about, and then it came down to driving up here. I'm like, well, if I was going to skip a song, which one would I skip? And going through it, I got to that one. I'm like, yeah, I would skip this one.
I almost said the same. I was going to make that choice as well, actually, when I, like, all the way up until about yesterday. I was like, I think I have to go with Time and Time Again, because when I'm listening to the album, if there's one that I kind of blur out, you know what I mean? Like, where I'm just, like, not noticing as much, then it's that song. But when I am into it, especially towards the end of the song, it just builds up. And I was like driving to work yesterday morning, and I'm like screaming Time and Time Again to myself in my car. And I was like, oh shit, I can't pick that one either. So I'm just completely bailing on my own rule here. And I'll try not to do that very often. I usually think I can pick a least good one. But I think we did kind of land, I guess, on Ghost Train and Time Again, which are beautiful, great songs that could have been singles in their own.
Time and time again, time and time again. I can't please myself.
Do you have any criticisms for this album?
Criticisms? Not really. I mean, other than if you haven't heard it, you need to listen to it.
That's more of a critique for the listener.
Yeah, that's for the listener. I mean, but for the album itself, I liked it. I mean, I always have. Though, listening to it now, when I was doing research, I started listening to Duritz's band before, the
I never listened to them.
Himalayans.
Okay.
And I actually heard, because Round Here is actually a cover of their song. The Himalayans released it first.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And it's a totally different song.
Oh.
Like, it doesn't sound the same. You can tell, but it's heavier.
Oh, okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's more of the kind of pop grunge of the time period, is what it sounds like.
About the front door like a ghost into the fog when no one notices the contrast of weight on weight. And in between the morning, you're the angels get a better view of the crumbling difference between wrong and right. I walk in the air between the rain, through myself and back again, where I don't know. Maria says she's dying through the door. I hear her crying. Why? I don't know. Round here, we always stand up straight.
Where are they on? Interscope? Where are they on here?
Geffen.
Columbia, Geffen? DGC. All right, DGC. They're on DGC. It's Geffen, you're right. Because I remember they had that Einstein on the Beach single from the compilation, that DGC Rarities compilation that was pretty good around the same time. It's funny, you know, this album's produced by T-Bone Burnett.
Yes.
And these days we think of him more as a guy who just, hey, he picked the songs that we're listening to in this movie, because it's always him and Randall Poster that are picking songs for movies, producing soundtracks, like Big Lebowski, for instance, is one he's probably most famous for. He's from Bob Dylan's band, and it's funny that they reference Bob Dylan in Mr. Jones. I can only imagine like T-Bone like sitting there in the studio and be like, hey, Bob, they're talking about you. But I remember reading this interview in Spin magazine when that came out, and he was like, immediately after it came out, he's like, I don't want to be Bob Dylan. I want to be Alex Chilton. It's like, oh, okay, all right. But I think they probably have a complicated relationship with that song, because it's the big hit and everyone wants to hear it. And have you heard live versions of it?
No, I have not.
They play with it. They'll play it like often at shows, but it's almost unrecognizable from what it used to be. It's a lot slower. It's a lot more like, it's almost like a slow Zydeco jam. No, it's funny, but it's awesome. At least last time I heard it.
Oh, they're coming to Cleveland later this month, I think.
Yeah, they're coming to Detroit on the weekend. I'm going to be out of town. I'm like, so I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm going to be seeing NoFX that night instead.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. I have seen them before. Have you seen Counting Crows?
I have not, no.
They're pretty amazing live. I haven't seen them since the 90s. I saw them twice in the 90s. I saw them after the Long December tour, which was great. I was in the very front, and I remember like getting crushed, and at one point, like, I forget what song.
Crush at a Counting Crows concert?
Yeah, well, it was 96, 97. They were at their peak, you know. And I remember, I think it was during Round Here, he actually started just like pushing the whole crowd back, and like in his vocals was like singing like, move back, you're crushing people. And the whole crowd just kind of gently like, oh yeah, we're at a Counting Crows concert. Just kind of gently moved, like took 4 big steps back, and I was like, oh, thank God. Thank you, man. Then I saw him again like at a really big venue for when they did This Desert Life, and it was all themed around like the album artwork for that. Was really cool. Do you have any specific memories tied up with this album that you want to get into?
The only one would be Mr. Jones, and just singing that in the car all the time. That was when I was learning to drive and stuff, so it was always on the radio. So just belting that thing out, windows down.
It was a ubiquitous hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine them getting nauseated by it, but I'm still not sick of it.
No, I'm not
still
either.
not. Like every time I hear it, I'm very happy to hear it, and it's still a strong song on that album.
Yeah.
It really is. And it's also, again, sad. It's so ironic that this is the song that got them super famous, to the point that he actually kind of seemed like he was like pushing back against the fame. Like, I don't want to be this famous. And the lyrics of the song are like, once everybody loves me, I'll be okay. I'll be happy. Things will be good then. If I can just get famous and beloved and be on the TV. And then he gets so big, he's dating fucking Winona Ryder and that kind of shit. He's so famous, and then still...
Christina Applegate.
Did he? You dated Christina?
Yeah.
You fucker. But who could blame them? I mean, that voice as an artist, like he's very engaging. You know?
Yeah. It's hard to believe he wrote that song drunk.
Did he really?
Yeah. Because he wrote it about a night, him and one of his buddies...
Mr. Jones?
Yeah, Marty Jones.
Okay.
He was a bass player. But they were hanging out, and they were actually hanging out at New Amsterdam in San Francisco.
Okay.
A bar. And they were watching another...
A flamenco dancer? A black-haired flamenco dancer?
Yeah.
And looking at a yellow-haired girl?
Yeah. Because they were watching Kenny Johnson. He was a drummer for Chris Isaak.
Okay.
And they were watching him, and he had a bunch of girls around talking to him. And he said they were both just kind of watching him and everything.
Yeah, and envying like the attention that he was getting as a musician and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Marty's dad was actually a flamenco player. He played guitar. So that's why they were there watching it, but they were just getting drunk and watching this other guy play for Chris Isaak and seeing him get all the women.
So he stumbled home and scrawled out the lyrics in a kind of a jealous stupor.
Yeah, and Mr. Jones is who he was hanging out with.
And stumbling through the barrio with. Yeah. All right, that makes sense. Very literal song. And again, I'm not surprised that it's about California. So many of their songs end up being about... I mean, like, the dude is obsessed with the whole, like, let's go get a taco. Yeah, fucking, I love it. I think, for me, one of my favorite memories about this album... I've debated what kind of stories I'm going to tell about my personal life on this show. That usually mean me editing out times I did hallucinogens, but I'll tell this story. The first time I ever did karaoke, I was 21 at a bar in Orlando.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I'm going to do Around Here. But I also had dropped acid. but it hadn't kicked in yet.
Oh, no.
So I was a little buzzed, and like just acid was like just kicking in, and I got up on the stage and I did Round Here, and I did it as best as I possibly could. And like everyone was like politely clapping, and like everyone was like, "Oh," I got some nice compliments, and I'm like, "Okay, I think I like karaoke. That was nice." And then my time to go again came up a little bit later, and me and my buddy Charles, who was also engaged in the hallucinogenic activities, decided it would be a good idea to get up on this stage doing karaoke, a screamo version of the Escape Club's Wild Wild West. No one liked it.
Okay. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, we did. We did.
You guys did.
But I'm a big karaoke guy. I've always done a lot of karaoke since, and it's like that was what I burst my bubble with, which made sense for me.
Oh, I've only ever done karaoke once. I can't sing.
Yeah, if it's something you don't enjoy, then it's like hell for you. But for me, singing has always been something. It's like dancing or whatever. It's just kind of like a cathartic, letting loose kind of feeling that I get from it.
Just give me a pair of drumsticks. I'm good.
See, everyone's got their thing.
Yeah.
There you go. So it sounds like for you also, this was one of those ride or die forever albums. Never stopped listening to it.
Yeah, I had it on CD, and then once digital became big, I have it on digital. So it's constant.
Yeah, same. I've never ever stopped since '93. Never stopped. One of my all-time, maybe top 5 favorite albums. It's just really, really, really important to me. Did you stick with them in their other work that they put out, or did you kind of tune out?
I followed them for a little while. The one they released when we were working together, because I remember it came out and we came in like after that weekend.
Is it the Covers album? Underwater Sunshine?
No, it was Rain. I forget.
Not Somewhere Over the Rainbow, but something like that.
Raining in
Baltimore? Is that everything?
No. Saturday Night and Sunday Mornings.
No.
That's not
that was
it.
2008.
That's 2008.
And that's fantastic. That is fantastic. That is such a great album. No, the 2014, I think, is what you're thinking of. It's like a blue album. It came out after Underwater Sunshine.
Oh, Somewhere Under Wonderworld.
Somewhere Under Wonderworld. That album is a bit of a dud.
Yeah.
And so is the Covers album, frankly. So, like, the 2010s, not a great run for them. They had that live album in there. Like, I didn't tune out then, but I just hadn't been... I listened to everything they've ever put out. But those 2 albums, I was like, all right. Well, that's kind of... I think they're starting to lose their edge. I don't know if you've listened to the 4-song EP they put out recently.
No, I haven't heard that yet.
I think it's what they're touring in support for. It's like a fucking 4-song EP, but it's really, really good.
Okay.
It's got the song...
Check that one out.
The first song's called The Tall Grass, and I think it's one of the better things I've heard from them in, well, literally like a decade. There is some good stuff on those 2010s albums for sure, but they're not up to snuff compared to what came before that, this Desert Life and stuff.
Yeah, it's hard to live up to some of this, especially when they have the success of the previous albums.
Yeah. I do get the feeling that they're lifers. I'm disappointed I'm not going to see them come through, but I'm like, I feel like they're not done. They're a working band. You know what I mean? I feel like we'll get a chance to see them.
Yeah, because there's a lot of bands that are just not around anymore.
Right.
From 93, 94, so...
These guys never really stopped.
Yeah, they just kept going.
Yeah.
I mean, there was some lulls and some years where they didn't release a lot of stuff,
Right.
but, I mean, they've been together ever since. They haven't broken up, officially or unofficially.
They're waking up Maria, 'cause everybody else has got some place to go. She makes a little motion with her head, rolls over, says she's gonna sleep for a couple minutes more. I said, I'm sorry to Maria for the cold-hearted thing that I have done.
Charlie Gillingham plays piano and all that other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then Matt Malley on bass, Steve Bowman on drums, David Bryson on guitars for this album at least.
Yeah, and Steve Bowman, for some reason, his nickname is the Skin Doctor. I couldn't find out what that was in reference to, so maybe I don't want to know.
He is the drummer, right?
Yep.
Okay, good. Because then we understand what it means. It just still sounds disturbing. It sounds like an Alex Cross book, you know? like Morgan Freeman's going to be chasing the Skin Doctor. did you figure out what song you want to use to go out on?
To go out on, I'd like to do Murder of One, being
Okay.
my favorite, and I think one of the strongest, top 3 strongest of the album. I think that would be the best one.
That's what we'll use.
In August and everything after, you get a little less than you expected somehow.
Yeah, it was hard to believe that of the singles, one of them didn't chart, and the
Which
highest, Murder of One didn't chart.
That's wild.
Mr. Jones peaked at number 5.
It did?
Yeah.
It never hit number 1?
Never hit number 1.
I'm shocked.
Round Here didn't chart either.
Really?
Yeah,
I
at least
thought-
not here in the U.S. And Rain King charted at 66 in the U.S.
66.
66.
Maybe they're more famous in my brain than they are in reality.
Now, if you go to Canada, Round Here peaked at 6, and Rain King peaked at 18.
They simply have better musical taste in Canada. This is a fact.
And then in Iceland, Round Here came in 12th, and Rain King was 4th.
Nice. Good taste out there, too,
Yeah,
from what I hear. Yeah, you know, this was a really crowded time in American music. 94, 93. You know, 'cause this came out in 93, but I feel like Mr. Jones... Yeah, Mr. Jones was like a single... I think even before the album came out. I want to say late summer of 93. No?
no, 3 months after.
3 months after the album came out. So
Yeah.
Mr. Jones was released as a single around Christmas?
December 1st.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
I guess I probably maybe didn't become as aware of it until the following spring, because I remember in my head it being very much associated with summer and like light and being outside. Maybe that's when it like picked up as a single or something. I don't know. Or memory's a weird thing, especially when you start going 30 years back.
Yeah, it's hard to remember some things.
Yeah. I will say this. I cannot possibly convey how much I love this album. We've been talking for like a half hour. We could talk 10 times this, and I will just repeat myself over and over again. But I would cut a lung out for this album. I love it so much.
Yeah, it's definitely top 10.
Yeah, it's great.
So
It's beautiful.
it'd be one of those ones where at the end of your life, you just list 10 albums. It's going to be in there.
For me too, absolutely. And you know, this cover, you know, this classic fucking cover with that font, it's just so warm, you know? It's just so warm. It's
And
the whole thing.
that cover, those words are actually the lyrics for the song "August and Everything After," which
Exists.
which exists. They never released it on. It didn't make the cut for the album.
Yeah.
But Amazon actually released it back in January 24th of 2019.
When it all catches up to me and they finally bring me down, do you think I'm gonna cry? Well, listen, I already got my disease, so get your fucking filthy hands off of me. I hope you weren't expecting me to be crucified. The best that they can do is just to hang me from the nearest tree. Yeah, it's midnight in San Francisco, and I am waiting here for Jesus on my knees. In August and everything after, I need somebody else to bleed for me. Yeah, in August and everything after, I need somebody else to bleed for me.
So 26 years later, they actually released the song that the album's named after.
I feel like I heard it as a bootleg before that. I know I'd heard it somewhere, you know, back in the LimeWire days.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, but I didn't.
LimeWire, Napster.
All that shit. Yeah, I heard it back then. And some of the other outtakes from this album that ended up being on. They've released a live version of this album. They've released like an extended version of this album with other live songs and stuff
Yep.
like this. They certainly recognize the importance of this album in their careers, that's for sure. And have treated it dutifully, I think.
Yeah, they've done wonders with re-releases and adding the additional tracks. There's one from Paris too. It's amazing.
Yeah. And the live versions of these songs. They had that live album from Amsterdam. They had the Roadshow one, which I forget, Echoes of the whatever, the one from the 2010s.
Yeah.
They have the entire live album of this, and then they have the special edition of this. Have you heard the VH1 Storytellers one? Like they did Across the Lines or whatever it's called. It's like a double disc album.
Oh no, I haven't.
I strongly recommend that. It's a double disc live album, and it's got actually one song on it. It's from this era, and the song is called Chelsea. It's one of their very best songs. That's the only place you can find it is live on that album. So definitely recommend that album. My point being, though, that usually I get irritated when bands take songs that I love and start playing with them for years later and, like, you know, reworking them. But they do it beautifully. They do a really great job with all their stuff.
Agreed. Yeah.
So what else are you listening to? Anything else of late? Any new albums or old albums? Or
As of late, Uncle Lucius
not familiar.
album, and You Are Me. It's a little bit older.
Okay.
But I really enjoy it.
What's the genre?
Rock, I guess, would be the easiest way to to put it. It doesn't really fall into alternative or anything. So
Cool.
one of the subcategories of rock. Red Light King. I haven't heard of that.
No.
He actually sampled Old Man from Neil Young
Yeah.
and created a new song and does a little bit of rap in it. So
Okay.
it's a rock rap type deal. It's interesting.
Okay.
It's something different. And then Mo Lauda and Humble. Yeah,
Are these all newer bands?
last 10 years.
Yeah, I've checked out, man. I don't know what the
15
fuck's going on the last 10 years. Talk to me about the 90s.
Oh, I've been getting too. I was listening to the new Smashing Pumpkins and then the new Godsmack that's come
Okay.
out. It's not like their old stuff. I mean, I like it. Am I going to listen to it like I did the stuff from the 90s? No.
That's what I'm saying. A lot of times these bands, they start declining in output, no matter how great they were back in the day. That's why I was so pleased with this new 4-song single from Counting Crows. I'm like, oh, they do got some juice left in that Capri Sun of their band or whatever the fuck. I've been listening to a lot of Fugazi, which I never listened to Fugazi much, but suddenly I've been listening to a whole bunch of them. And on the other end of that spectrum, I've been listening to a lot of early They Might Be Giants. So
Okay,
that's
yeah.
what I've been doing.
That was darn nice there, Mr. Duritz. Any comments from the bridge?
All right, I have one last question for you.
Oh, okay.
One last question. You and I met at a bookstore.
Yes.
This should be an easy one, I think. There are 5 bookstores I'm going to give you the option for. Because in the 1990s, how much did we all love going to some fucking random bookstore
Yep.
that was set up as some mega media conglomerate, whatever, and you could browse vinyl and you could browse magazines and books and get some coffee and read a graphic novel and not pay for it and then go somewhere else. You know, the overstuffed armchairs.
Oh,
So-
I miss those.
Me too, man. I miss all of those. And Barnes & Noble, where you and I worked, still
Yeah.
exists. So I'm going to give you some options. The first 2 technically still exist, but we're going to go back in time.
Okay.
In the late 90s, let's say, when they're at their peak, right? Which one of these locations would you be most likely to go and spend an afternoon in as little money as possible?
Oh, as little money as possible.
Well, you know what I
Okay.
mean.
Yeah.
Because, like, you'd go and you'd read their stuff
And yeah,
and you'd walk out with a CD or a movie or a book or something or two, but like you would have also just kind of used their stuff like a library.
Yeah.
So Barnes and Noble, of course. Books A Million, which has been around since 1916 or something. I had no
Wow.
fucking idea. Yeah,
I didn't either.
I thought that was new. And it's still around, so we could go there. But let's go further back.
Okay.
B. Dalton.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
B. Dalton Bookstore.
The old mall bookstore.
The old mall bookstore. And then the other old mall bookstore, which was Walden Books.
Yes, that too.
Right?
I bought many a book from both of those places.
Same. Yeah, those would be like the B line when I went to the mall. But they didn't have like the whole setup, say, that the last option has, which is Borders, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Michigan's own Borders.
Mm-hmm.
So which one would you go to?
I would have to say Barnes & Noble holds a special place after working there for 20 years.
Was it
But,
20 years that you worked there?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. It was a while.
I was there for, I think, 2.
I'm going to have to say Borders. The first CD I ever bought was from Borders.
Oh, yeah?
And it was with a gift certificate.
Nice.
So,
Dude, I mean, coming from Michigan, I used to regularly frequent the Borders #1 in Ann Arbor, the first store. Then have like bands play there and stuff. It was so great. And then even the one that they built like in Brighton that I would go to, you could just spend a whole afternoon there. I'm definitely going to betray Barnes and Noble. They only paid me minimum wage. I'm going to Borders Books and Music, and it almost seems wild to me that they went out of business. But I guess it's just the way that content has moved. It's all digital now. So
Yeah, everything's changed from that point. So
they were behemoths.
Like even the Barnes Nobles now are. It's not like it was before.
Yeah, and it never will be. But in our mind, we can hang out and sip our whatever latte and read Borders books.
Yep. I still listen to that CD. I still have it.
What CD? What is it?
CCR Chronicle.
Which Chronicle? One or
One.
two? One is the that was one that has Born on the Bayou in it, right? Yeah, that was the one I didn't have. I had Chronicle 2, but I will say that both of those Chronicle albums made our whole generation a big fan of CCR, because it seems like everybody I know had one or the other or both.
Yeah, I had Chronicle 1. That was the first one I bought on CDs, and I have it on vinyl now too.
Nice.
But yeah, that's always one that keeps getting played.
Yeah. And to bring it back to the Counting Crows, I feel like they too will be like one of those long-lasting bands that our kids, well, I'm not having any fucking kids, but my friends' kids will be listening to.
Yeah, we'll make them listen to it.
Whether they want to or not.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thank you so much for making the trip out here again. You and I are now going to go get some lunch, and we're going to go to a brewery and enjoy ourselves, right?
Sounds good to me. Maybe we can write a song. Mr. Roy.
As a teacher, that just has like a different connotation for me, because now it seems like I'm supposed to like tell you to learn something. Go learn something. All right, thanks, man.
All right, well, guys, thanks.
All right, you guys, I'm going to wax philosophical for a moment. Bear with me. One of the weirder memories I have attached to this album, August and Everything After, involves a dream, I think, that I had. Or more likely just audio seeping into my consciousness while I was asleep. When I was growing up, I used to have over my bed a collection of cassette tapes in shelving units on the wall above me, and then below that, against the wall, was my radio that I kept in the bed with me and I slept with every night. And sometimes I would go to sleep with it on, but more often than not, I would wake up and turn it on. And I had this weird memory, dream, whatever, of hearing the song Rain King in my sleep, like in a dream, and then waking up and then turning the radio on and it being on the radio. Now, the reality, of course, is that me turning the radio on is probably something that my brain has implanted in there. The reality is that almost certainly that the radio was already on while I was asleep, and then I woke up and heard what was already playing. That's what makes sense. So that's probably what happened. But for a long time, I felt like I had this weird psychic kind of blip where I knew what song was going to be on the radio before I turned the radio on. And in a weird way, that's kind of how I've always felt about this album, in a way, because when you're 12, 13, 14 years old, it's a very transitional period in your life. It's like you're coming out of a dream of childhood, you know, where things are fuzzy and inchoate and unfocused. And then you get the bitter clarity of adulthood. So, yeah, this album has been such a key part of those years of my life, like so many other albums that I've discussed on this show. I mean, it's why I've chosen these years, really, to be the focal point of the show. Not just the fact that I think great music came out of those 2 years, but because that was when I felt like I was coming to life in a way. Very awesome for Adam to come back and talk about this album with me. It means a lot. He's a great dude. Maybe you want to come on the show and talk about an album from 93 or 94 with me. That would be very cool. I'd love it if you did. You could pick pretty much any album you want that I haven't already covered. Just let me know. And if you need like some prompting, maybe you'd be interested in talking about the Flaming Lips album, Transmissions from the Satellite Heart. All right, that's from the era. That would make sense.
She don't use jelly or
We could talk about whatever you want. You can also email me at 9394podcast@gmail.com. That is the numerical 9394 podcast, all one word, at gmail.com. You can find me on the social medias the same way. This is a fledgling podcast still. I'm still getting things going here. If you're a regular listener, please do me a favor and rate, review, subscribe, follow, whatever method the platform you're using has to give podcasts a boost. That would be much appreciated. Thanks. And, yeah. Okay. That's it. Bye. '93.94, a music podcast with Travis Roy, is a labor of love. It is not and never will be monetized. Please don't sue.